Hello, Betty.
Hey.
I'm here to help.
Okay.
But is it alright if I film a little bit?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to pick some of these. Got a lot of hops if people at the farm want some. You ever had hops?
Betty, could I just get you to introduce yourself to the camera?
Okay. I'm Betty Werner, co-owner here at Four Corners Farm, property in Franklin County, Virginia, that's being directly impacted by the Mountain Valley Pipeline.
And when did you acquire this property here?
We bought it November of 2010. And the grandchildren moved here December 2010. And then my husband and I, when he retired, moved here May of 2011. So we had 4 generations on the farm. My mother too, loving it, and raising chickens and cows, milking a cow. Yeah. Sitting on this porch with the absolute peace and quiet. Not a house to be seen.
And all that came to an end starting
Well,
when?
yeah, it was 2014, the fall, late fall, early winter of 2014, when word was out that MVP, this pipeline company, was acquiring land. Get a letter saying here's an offer for the easement that we're gonna put the pipeline across, and take it or leave it. If you leave it, then I guess we'll have to take you to court, all that. So there was a whole bunch of folks. So this is our best pasture. One end to the other, creek to creek. And on October 24th, we were delivered 4 stacks of 300 pages of a lawsuit against landowners that hadn't signed. So this was less than 2 weeks after their certificate. They sued in federal court over 300 landowners in Virginia and 100 and some in West Virginia, 2 different courts though, West Virginia court and Virginia court, for quick take eminent domain so they could get started. Well, obviously we lost that case. That was January of 2018, and the judge ruled in their favor, so they were here starting March, April, May, June, July. July is when they delivered all the pipes. So imagine they used our property as a thoroughfare to get to the next 2 parcels because they're not accessible. So imagine semi-trucks full of pipes roaring through back and forth for 2 or 3 days, delivering 100 section of pipe. That was July, and then August they were trying to get them all welded and coated, and they had to stop work, but they continued to work. But I know what that is.
What are they doing here?
They're putting a straw bale box in order to put a filter back in when they cross creeks or pump water out. It goes in there and doesn't go off LOD. It's only like, I don't know, 3.78 or 4.78 acres actually here, but this is, I believe this is about 17 or 20 acres, the whole land here that's been compromised. The field, because this was all field. Fence all the way to the other creek.
You used to have cows here?
Cows and the chickens, pigs. Hey, Phelan. Hey, girl. Pigs were in the woods here a lot, up that way and around.
And that was a good living.
It was, especially for the kids. This area, what's been cleared, this area was our best. Kids used to camp out here, picnic here, play in the creek here, right over under that area. We had broilers, probably 250 broilers down in the field when they were blasting in June 2018. And they were supposed to notify you, give you warning, and do all this beeps and whistles for when they were going to blast. But they didn't. They just blasted. I mean, we had their writing that said this is the procedures for blasting, which is not really called blasting. It's called forceful, something fancy, a word instead of blast.
But it's dynamite.
It's dynamite. Yeah, they plant dynamite all through this whole area. And of course it created a lot of dust, a lot of noise, a lot of stress on our animals.
Has someone directed you to film us? Hello?
Obviously not working.
Would you tell us what you're working on here today, sir?
Oh, they're working on the filter bag. And they have reported to FERC that this area is 100% completed with welded, coated, trenched, and I think it's like 86% backfilled.
Well, clearly not.
It's apparently not, because this has not been trenched, this whole length here. And now listen, as they tear up that hill, because it's kind of a steep hill, they've gotten stuck, they've spread dirt all over. But see, I did not get a solicator. Get that. So it is September 4th, 2019.
Can I ask why you made the decision to leave?
Just because we don't want to live here.
Even though you have so many fond memories.
Yeah, I'll get very emotional. Yeah, especially the youngest grandchild, which is why I have to leave, because I pick her up from school. But she was 1.5 when they moved here, so she's 10 now, and this is all she ever remembers is the farm growing up. So she's pretty attached. Jonas is not so much attached, because he was 12 and he had to do a whole lot of work as a young preteen. A lot of work on the farm, but my father retired from the Navy and bought a farm in a homestead in Oregon, so I know what it's like to have a sustainable family farm and to work on the farm. So I was more emotionally attached, I think, than my husband. Grew up in the city. But yeah, and I know part of the reason that my husband wants me away is because I tend to get too ingrained. I just pitch a tent and live down there, trying to document and show them show the world how shoddily they treat us, how rude and how intimidating they try to be. So it makes you kind of want to be that in return, be rebellious in return. So if all of us are fighting it, how are they going to arrest all of us? Thousands and thousands. It really becomes, I think it becomes a big blotch on the United States of America in the world setting, where many countries have banned fracking, they've banned natural gas, they know the methane emissions and the heat. Lord, it makes you so sad about the government, federal agencies and state agencies that just kind of have folded over for them almighty dollar. That's a real sad thing. But I'd say, keep the word spreading.
If you're just tuning in, you're catching End of the Line on WRIR 97.3.
We're at ground zero. I stand just against it because it's wrong.
I will give them my offer right now. What is it? $5.5 billion. And if you'll take that, that's not enough. They said that'll never happen. I said now we're all on the same page because you will never set foot on my property. This is home. You can't buy that.
This is 20 square miles of land disturbance for this project on slopes that are already called landslide prone by the U.S. Geological Survey. They could easily damage hundreds of people's water and cut it off completely and not be responsible whatsoever.
It's not this kind of benign sounding activity that they present to us. It's violence on the land.
We're going to end up with massive pollution to every stream that this pipeline crosses, including the cleanest waters in the state of Virginia, out in Western Virginia.
It was hard to go out and look at my friends and look them in the eye, and you just see what loss is there, and sorrow, and our lives just being so disruptive.
And I'm sorry, but the people who, my friend Heidi, it was going to be within 100 feet of her home. So if it ever were to explode, her whole family would be toast. If it was there, somewhere close to her home.
I'm not sure what hope is anymore. I sure as hell don't want to see this happen. But do I have hope that it won't? I think what I have now is pragmatism, is just a hunker down and do what you have to do and don't think about anything else.
That's really why I came here, is because this is where people are fighting back. I mean, I have separate reasons for why I'm against the pipeline, but I think the community here is very strongly against this pipeline, and that manifests itself in really tangible ways. People just showing up, people helping out however they can. They obviously want people out of here. They're trying to construct through here. You can see about how far they've come. No idea what's going to happen here or how long these trees will be up. And this is not the steepest slope that they built on. I mean, they also flipped an excavator right on the other slope, and they've done that before. So there is some problems, I think, with using they shouldn't put a pipeline here argument, though it is certainly true. This terrain is very inaccessible and not good for a pipeline. But on the other hand, there's no land that's good for a pipeline, that's oh, this is nice and flat, perfect, let's put a pipeline there. Especially in karst terrain, that's something else that makes this pipeline more dangerous. And then there are other risks which can't possibly be controlled for, climate change. I mean, no matter how they do their erosion control or whatever, there's nothing they can do to mitigate the increased risk from climate change from producing all of these emissions, because it's a natural gas pipeline. That's what it does. It was scarier when I had first gone up, obviously, because I hadn't experienced it before, but the oaks move a lot more than like a pine does. But I eventually learned that's good, because that means the oak is bending and it's not going to snap or break. It has a lot more like flex to it. But something that I would think of when I'd be up there and the tree would be moving like this, and it'd be really loud and windy, and I would just be scared as hell, is I would think about how old my tree was. And I've been told it's somewhere around like 70 years old. And I'd ask myself, do you think this is the worst storm this tree has been through in 70 years? And I would think, probably not. During times like that, sometimes I would put my hand out like through the tarp and just feel the tree, and just kind of just put my own trust in the tree and think of that and think of how old the tree is, and just know like this tree's got me, it's gonna be okay. I was there for most of the winter time, and this was the first winter I'd really been through, well, first fall and winter I'd really been through anywhere remotely north. So I got to see snow for the first time, you see the leaves change color for the first time. So that was really something.
Like, how do you stay warm up there?
I think staying warm was actually not that hard, and that was a good thing to learn. I think I learned a lot about layering, and if you layer properly, it's, not too much of an issue. It'll still be cold, but, when all else fails, there's always my sleeping bag within a sleeping bag, which, on the really bitterly cold days, I would just retreat into that and just kind of stay there and read a book. I don't think I was really, as much of a tree hugger when I went into the tree, as weird as that sounds, but being up there kind of made me more of one, and I developed a relationship with that tree, I think. I think it's a really great tree. I consider it like my tree friend, and I think that cutting down and killing that tree is in and of itself a loss. I think it's an inherent bad to kill other forms of life, especially when it's, wanton and it's totally needless, as this pipeline is. And that's something that sort of goes untalked about, because, even if they do cut these trees down, I think it was a win in and of itself that the trees were allowed to live for just a year longer, or however much longer, because they're their own life form. And I think they're just as worthy of life and of flourishment as we are. And, for the loggers that will come and cut them down, I doubt that's something they ever think about. So imagining, scaling up this much resistance to how much it's going to take to completely replace all fossil fuels, and then comparing what needs to happen with what's happening now with, things like Extinction Rebellion and Climate Strike and the Sunrise Movement. I mean, no offense to those things, but I think those things are, 1% of what needs to happen. It's certainly a step in the right direction, but being realistic, I have very little reason to suspect that in 11 years we're going to replace all fossil fuel infrastructure. So given that fact, the future is probably going to be pretty bad. And that people say that's very depressing, and I think that can be true. I don't find it especially depressing, but I think there's another fact that's even worse than that, and that's the future will be extremely bad, but I think actually for some people it's going to be okay. For the extremely wealthy, I think they'll largely be unaffected, or will even thrive. So I was arrested, I think, somewhere around July 20th or something like that, for allegedly locking myself to something in the path of the pipeline and thereby stopping construction in that area for, it was actually about the entirety of the workday. I think they got me out around like 5 p.m. The experience was interesting, somewhat enlightening. I mean, so the police showed up. This was state police, some kind of special tactical kind of SWAT division. They didn't seem to be regular state police, and they approached me with guns drawn and, said, "Show us your hands," which, I was not really able to do so. And I told them from the get-go that I preferred to remain silent, that, I was unarmed, wasn't going to hurt them, had no way of hurting them, and I was just going to remain silent. And I said that a few other times. But in spite of that, they continued to ask me questions and seemed to get upset when I wouldn't answer their questions. And I think I got a little bit of an insight into like their minds and sort of what it is to be a cop. And I got the feeling that they kind of knew what they were doing was wrong, and they didn't like that I was refusing to validate them as just regular people doing a job. You know, if you talk to someone, the cashier at a gas station, you know, you might make some kind of small talk with them or something like that, because they're just a person working a job, whatever. You have no feelings for them, really positive or negative. That's not true of the police for me, and for that reason I wasn't interested in engaging with them or validating what they do for a living. And they picked up on that and really did not seem to enjoy it and kind of punished me for that in some ways. As they were getting me out, they kind of started out, you know, feeling like, all right, whatever, we're here, we're going to do this job. And it was a strenuous and difficult task for them. And as they went on and got more and more frustrated, I felt like their mask was kind of starting to slip, and I was seeing the more violent nature of them behind that. And on a couple occasions, they said things, and I could hear, not so much in what they said, but in the tone of voice, that this is someone that's really in touch with their more violent, sort of sadistic side. And I think one of the comments was like, you know, what if we just left him here and nobody cared? And at first they were trying to be friendly and buddy-buddy, you know, you need any water, you doing okay? And then it kind of became more like that towards the end. Was, you know, fuck you, like what if we just hurt you and there's no one around to hear you scream? Because the police are people that exercise total control over other people, and they operate with impunity, and you can tell by their demeanor that they're very used to that. You know, I'm going to do whatever I want, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you're going to obey. And the slightest bit of resistance to them, in my case just not talking to them, just bothered them to no end, because they couldn't compel me to speak to them. And I think that seemed to get on their nerves. After that, I mean, the rest of the experience was just extremely boring, and it was interacting with bureaucracy, you know, filling out forms and being fingerprinted and photographed and whatnot. But I have no love for the police or what they do. And in fact, I mean, these kinds of projects could not happen without, like, implicit state subsidies and guarantees. So if there were no cops, there could be no pipeline. All of the evidence in the world says we should not be doing this, and yet they are continuing to do this. And that's, you know, mostly I think a result of how capitalism operates. You know, EQT has shareholders, and they are legally responsible to those shareholders and to deliver to them a maximum profit on their investment.
Like up here,
so for them, it's just irrelevant that it might destroy human life in the next few decades. It just doesn't matter to them. What does matter is making profit in the next quarter. And that's not so much a fault of the individual shareholders, but of capitalism as a whole. And it's one of the reasons why, to me, that suggests there is no solution that is not anti-capitalist. Because the problem isn't that we just have a few bad people. The problem is that we have a bad system, and whoever is in charge is going to be beholden to that system. And so what do you say to people to kind of wake them up and, you know, shake them up and say, don't you see how wrong this all is? And I think what I would say in the most immediate term is that all of our comfort and our, you know, lush lifestyle is based on other people's suffering. And it's and also the suffering of, you know, other forms of life, which sort of goes ignored. But the entire industrial base of our civilization, like aluminum and bauxite, you know, where does it come from? Where is it being processed? And the answer increasingly is in places like India, where tribal populations that live there are being displaced, their homes are being destroyed. There's been an especially violent and military-style crackdown on people that are resisting. And that's, you know, just in one place, but that's kind of the story writ large, is these natural resources are coming from the developed world, and the circumstances in which they're being extracted are especially violent. It's also based on the exploitation of poor people and poor people of color within the United States. So if you want to, you know, people say, well, you know, things are fine now, capitalism is functioning fine now, you know, what do you say to that? And I would say, well, why don't we ask someone living in like the slums of Cairo or in Delhi or Beijing or, Los Angeles for that matter. Ask someone living on the streets in the US, how is capitalism going for this person? And I think once you start to think of things in that way, and you understand that something like 40% of human life on Earth doesn't have access to clean drinking water and doesn't have a stable access to food, when you frame it that way, I think it seems very clear to me that capitalism is not functioning. Or it is functioning for a small minority of people, which includes us. And it's a very sad fact that if you happen to be one of those people born in the wealthy Western world, you can actually ignore those people suffering if you choose to and say, things are fine for me, I drive this car and live in this house, I don't see a problem with capitalism. And that's because you're ignoring the billions of other people who are starving at this very minute.
Do you think it's possible to stop the pipeline?
It's definitely possible. If we want to be realistic, it's very improbable. And I personally have no problem with the knowledge that we're probably going to lose. The pipeline is probably going to be built. And that doesn't really affect me at all. I don't find that depressing or upsetting. I think it just is what it is. I personally, I fight for reasons other than hope that we're going to succeed in the struggle, and I think it's useful to have reasons beyond hope, because I think hope is very fickle. And I think a lot of people kind of know what it is that they should be doing, and they have some sense of how they should be living, but there's always some excuse for why they don't do that. Or they feel like they can't, or they feel like they're trapped in their job and their social life and the distractions of civilization. And I mean, to those people, I would just say, I'm here to support you in doing that thing that you should do. I don't know what you should do, but I think you do. And whatever it is, I would like to help you get there.
There's gotta be some hope. There's gotta be some hope. There's gotta be some way for you to send your dogs away and to leave the land alone. It's gotta be a crime. Somewhere in your heart you'll find we're fighting for our right to keep the future bright and protect the ones we love. Our sisters and our brothers, we are camping out for each other. We are stronger when we band together, and we're standing up for the water. Don't poison the future away. You've gotta have a soul. Mother Earth protects us all. If you treat her with disrespect, then what message have you left for your children and their home? Our sisters and our brothers, we are camping out for each other. We are are stronger when we band together, and we're standing up for the water. Don't poison the future away. How can you take and not appreciate the soil? Don't let this black snake contaminate our drinking water. This is for our sons and daughters. And the river is our sisters and our brothers. We are camping out for each other. We are stronger when we band together, and we're standing up for the water. Don't poison the future away.